Good morning. This is the talk for the Center for Spiritual Living of the Tri-Cities for September 26th, 2021. Today's talk is entitled Centering, Getting to Know the Innate Unity of All. We'll open today with a word of affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment. So take a few moments now with me to let go of all that is unlike peace and centering, and to know the truth together. And that truth is that there is only one power and presence, one transcendent, all-encompassing, all-embracing life. This life is my life right here and right now. I know that this life is the very core and center of all forms of life. Every point of reality on this planet and beyond is made out of this unifying, creative force. And I know that this one power, one presence, one life, transcendent though it is also intimately aware and acquainted with all of life, from the tiniest creature on the bottoms of the ocean to the birds of the air, and indeed my very life. The life that I entrust myself to moment by moment is also this one life. I know that it vivifies my thoughts and brings to me my heart's desire. The more that I choose to allow the forms of my thought to fall with peace, the more this peace is reflected back to me in my experience of life. I know that all light, all life, all love, all peace, all power, all beauty, and all joy exist within this one life. And I know that the more that I choose to believe that I am destined to be one with each and every one of these qualities, the more I see them cultivated effortlessly in my life. I choose to practice the presence each and every day. I choose to meditate, to contemplate, to center myself in this truth, to practice that presence, to know that I am ever seeking a greater understanding, a greater comprehension of this one life, of our higher power, of source, of God, of spirit. I know that it is known by many names, and I know that my understanding of it grows and is fortified by an understanding that transcends words. I embrace this truth. I raise a grateful heart and release myself and entrust myself to the process. And so it is. I love living in the Pacific Northwest for many reasons. Of course, we have great weather much of the year, but perhaps the reason I love it most is the natural wonder that I see. In particular, I have a soft spot for our forests and the topography of the region because they fill me with awe. I remember the very first time I took a real hike into the Columbia River Gorge outside of Portland, Oregon, and how amazed I was that I felt so tiny in the midst of the larger landscape. In the midst of the forest as well, I felt tiny in comparison. Yet somehow I knew with certainty that the forest in the midst of this miracle of geology and I were somehow the same. Somehow we were connected. Somehow we were two parts of the same whole. And I didn't know it at the time, but this would one day become one of the defining tenets of my belief: unity. We've been talking these past weeks about the spiritual tools in our toolbox. We began with considering meditation and relaxation techniques, and we talked about how practicing these can help us to expand our awareness, to raise our consciousness. We next spent time on affirmations, why they work, how to reconcile the affirmative thought we are cultivating with difficult emotions, and then last week we considered contemplation of words of wisdom. And we thought about how contemplating or thoughtfully considering these words can help us to change consciousness because they can help us to expand our perspective or to gain a new mental framework from which to think. We had a very nice quote from Louise Hay that I shared along with my story of how I learned to begin to believe that we can release the need to criticize ourselves and others, remembering that when we criticize, we cut ourselves off from perceiving the innate oneness in all of life. That same oneness is at the root of the spiritual practice that we are discussing today, which is centering. In the science of mind, which is the New Thought practice, we think about what we colloquially term meditation as three distinct yet interlocking spiritual practices. There is meditation, which is practiced awareness of the breath or mindfulness of another object of concentration. Then there's contemplation of words, a mantra, a reflection on this as an object of thoughtful consideration. Okay, so we had meditation, which is really awareness of an object of concentration. So your breath, or perhaps just mindfulness of your experience. Then there is contemplation, which focuses on words of wisdom or a mantra. And this is the way that we kind of incorporate new thoughts into our understanding. And today we're considering centering. And centering is focusing on the space in which we feel connected to life, to God, to spirit, to our higher power. And I'm sure you can think of a time when you have either felt in awe of nature or the synchronicity that brought you or someone whom you know to the right place at the right time and doing the right thing for something miraculous to happen. And I am sure that you can think of a time when something caused you to feel either so tiny in comparison with the vastness of the natural world or so intricately connected to it that you were certain you could feel the earth breathing. This is the same sense of unity and awe that we can cultivate and heighten through this practice of centering. Centering is based on what Judge Thomas Troward called in his seminal work, The Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science, the unity of spirit. Judge Troward was an influential voice in New Thought, and his first principle was of, quote, spirit as the underlying origin of all things we see, a universal substance which, at this stage, is not differentiated into any specific forms. This is not a question of some bygone time, but subsists at every moment of all time in the innermost nature of all being. And when we see this, we see that the division between one specific form and another has below it a deep and essential unity, which acts as the supporter of the several forms of individuality arising out of it, unquote. Put another way, this one transcendent and unified spirit is the very fiber of all that is. It is at the core of all the myriad forms of life. It is the very stuff of which we are made, the truth of who and what we are. This one transcendent life, with a capital L, as I like to say, both creates and also sustains. It vivifies all forms of life that we see and all forms of life that we don't see. Judge Troward reminds us that because spirit is infinite and limitless, it is everywhere present in its entirety. This means that the whole of this one transcendent life is wholly present within each point of creation. There is no such thing as a single drop of transcendent life. Spirit cannot be sectioned off or meted out in this way. It is existent in its entirety at every point in time and space. Importantly, this underscores the idea that spirit exists in its entirety not only at every point in space, but also at every point in time, past, present, and every potential future. This is critical to our understanding that brings about abiding peace. This means that our heart's desire, whatever that might be at the moment, exists within the same infinitude of life as we ourselves, whether it exists in the world as we know it or not. Ernest Holmes, in The Science of Mind, reminds us of this when he says, quote, "Principle is absolute, and insofar as any individual can actually induce within consciousness, upon principle, a definite, concrete acceptance of their desire, it will manifest, even if every thought on earth had to change to compel it. If it were a bit of information that only one person on earth knew, and that person was in the center of Africa, it would be produced." It's important here to mention that Holmes is saying at the center of Africa, meaning that it's someplace quite remote or unknown to the person affirming the thing. This is because when The Science of Mind was written in 1926, the continent of Africa, and in particular the deepest part of its wilderness, were seen as largely undocumented in the United States where Holmes lived. So here, he means that even if the information or knowledge were known only to one person in a place so remote to the person seeking that knowledge through consciousness work, it would still be produced because of the inherent unity of all of life and the unity of consciousness. So where does this leave us in our pursuit of spiritual tools that can help us change our thinking to change our lives? It's clear because of the unity of life, the unity of all, and the infinitude of spirit, or as I like to call it, life with a capital L, that same unity and infinitude is within us as well as all around us. As Judge Troward reasons, nothing lies outside of this infinitude of unity. There is one infinite life. It is omnipresent or everywhere present. There is one infinite life, and it is boundless in its pervasiveness. In the book of Acts of the Bible, it is put this way: "For in him we live and move and have our being." This means that Source exists in its entirety at every point, including within you and me, and also that we find ourselves surrounded and embraced and immersed, encircled by Source. We are swimming in it. And this means that there is a real potential for us to become more aware of this truth by making a conscious effort to get in touch with life, by doing what mystic Joel Goldsmith calls practicing the presence. How can we practice the presence of God in our lives? Of course, we can do so through meditation, affirmation, and contemplation of words of wisdom. And we can also do this by sitting quietly and seeking to get in touch with the very real sense of unity and oneness. We can do so by contemplating the very notion that there is only one transcendent life and one pervasive, all-encompassing, all-embracing unity that is spirit, that is God, that is our higher power, that is life, that is Source. It is known by many names. That life is your life right here and right now. It is the very fiber of your being, the very core of who and what you are. Meditating and contemplating this truth, affirming this truth, and seeking to grasp and comprehend it on a level that goes beyond words is what a centering practice is. Seeking to allow your consciousness to alight upon this understanding, this innate sense, this understanding is what centering practice is. So take a few moments each day to go into the silence and to meditate and reflect upon this truth. In your mind's eye, see this truth for yourself, that there is one transcendent and infinite life, that this life is the very core of your being, and that there is a pervasive and all-embracing oneness and unity that is life itself. Affirm and contemplate that this life is your life in the here and now, and know that your heart's desire also exists within this pervasive and all-encompassing one life. Therefore, you and your heart's desire, you and all of the God qualities are united right here and right now in this oneness. There is no separation, save for separation perhaps by time and space. And these are relative. We are dealing now in absolutes. Affirm for yourself that in seeking your heart's desire, whether it is light, life, love, power, peace, beauty, or joy, you are actually seeking to demonstrate or manifest more fully the presence of life itself in your experience. That is what it means to practice the presence, to understand that we are ever seeking God, both in truth and in practice. The more we seek to know Source and experience it in our lives, the more we gain our heart's desire as a result. Think of this as a bonus, goodies we get as a matter of course. But let us affix our motivation, our drive, our desire on knowing more fully who and what Source is in our lives, and let our practice focus on more fully comprehending the unity of all of life, and the fact that we are not separate so much as individualized points of consciousness in the greater whole. May you know today that life loves you, and so it is.